Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The Haunt of Love and Lies. Episode 2. Chapter 10. Sheila's point of view. May I help you? Came his deep, throaty voice. I swear I would have been turned on if it wasn't for the anger brewing in me. As a matter of fact, you may, I bit out angrily, squaring my shoulders while folding my hands against my chest. My eyes held his stare. Killian pulled away from his table. He carelessly tossed the quill pen in his hand on the table, his eyes coldly sizing me up. First and foremost, you are to knock and wait for my response before abruptly barging into my office, he warned, glaring coldly at me. And secondly, he placed his hand under his chin. When addressing me, you lose that tone. His voice was brutally cold, which only seemed to aggravate me further. What do you want? I held my stance, still locking eyes with him. I'd like to think I'm not a prisoner in my own pack. I've been here for days now, and I haven't stepped out of my chamber, not once, let alone left the castle walls. You know, I am not a dog that you can keep locked up in its cell. I held back the last word, adding stubbornly, Alpha. He was shameless. Not a single remorse in his eyes after I caught him with his lover. My heart burned, and I couldn't stop the tears that gathered in them, but my gaze refused to leave his. So, what are you saying? I felt his eyes wander over my body, keeping a straight face. Firstly, I hate having my meals alone in my chamber. I want to go down like everyone else, I said, forcing my emotions out of my voice. Killian's cold eyes regarded me thoroughly. For a split second, I thought I saw a flash of emotion stalk his amber eyes. That was impossible, though. Fine. I'll have that taken care of. He retracted his stare from me, shifting it to the pile of papers on his table. If that's all, you may take your leave now. No, I still have more to say. I remained fixed on my spot. Releasing an exhausting sigh, Killian's gaze met mine again. He folded his hand on his chest. What? He gestured with his hands. I want to leave the castle, and before I could finish my sentence in peace, Killian's deep voice interrupted me. Leave the castle. His eyes were turning dark, anger taking a toll on his voice. I nodded, trying to hide my fear. Yes, my chamber feels suffocating. I want to see the pack, and be able to take strolls, receiving some fresh air. His eyes softened as soon as I was done, but as usual, his expression was stoic. He was silent as if considering my words. Finally, he nodded again. That's also fine. I will arrange something with Rhiannon. You can leave now. I still have more to say, I voiced, hearing my own words echoing in my head. Killian seemed pissed, like he couldn't wait for me to just vanish from his sight. What now, Sheila? His voice was getting sharper and pointer, losing his patience. Even though you hate me, and do have a lover beside you, I paused, finding the right words, as Killian seemed interested in what I had to say. I'm still the Luna of this pack, and I want to be involved in everything that concerns the pack. I was surprised he didn't reproach me. In what way? I drew in some air. I could be involved with the pack's training. His eyes ran over my body for the briefest seconds before he spoke. No, why? My lips rushed a response. I really wanted to train. I always wanted to, but my father never allowed it, as I was never allowed to leave the pack house. It was bad enough that I didn't have a wolf like other wolves. I was already at a disadvantage. The least I could do was learn how to defend myself being the Luna of this pack. Because I said no, he growled, stopping any further argument. I really don't understand you. What do you want from me? I am the Luna of this pack. It's been bad enough that I've been silently rejected by my mate who has a lover. I already feel so useless and incapable as a mate, and Luna, at least allow me to do something for myself. I'm not some dog that needs to be locked up in its cage. I yelled in rage, and tears rushed from my eyes, burning my eyes. Killian was staring at me with a blank expression. Suddenly, his gaze avoided mine. He was up on his feet, moving to the window bars, sending his back to me. I will think about it. You may leave now. Without sparing another glance at me, I left the office, finding Ria outside the door. Her eyes were bright with smiles. I quirked my brows at her. The Alpha has given me permission to show you around the pack. I released a smile even though it didn't reach my heart. But after leaving the castle walls, I realized how suffocated I had felt. The air outside the pack was divine and nerve-calming. Ria was a darling. She showed me around the pack, but not everywhere. Killian had a very large pack, even larger than my father's. There was even a quarter for the Crescent North Witches, as I was told by Ria. I could really see why it was the largest pack in the whole of North Central. Ria left me in the pack's garden. It was beautiful. There was this thing about flowers that always seemed to calm me. I plucked some marigolds and roses, inhaling their scent. I inhaled more flowers in front of me, trying to overlook the chest pains I kept getting. It was uncomfortable. I had to press my hand on my chest in a futile attempt to make it ache less. But nothing worked. I knew the pain was as a result of Killian's infidelity, if it could be called that. Even though we were not mated yet, and he hadn't marked me as his, I could still feel the pain. I shook from my thoughts when short, unusual sounds escaped from the woods. I looked behind, and Ria had not yet returned. I took a few steps further. Is someone there? There was nothing in response. The eerie silence made my heart race with fear. The hairs on my skin rose in panic. Something was wrong. I turned around to run, but I was confused about which direction actually went to the castle. My confusion was instantly replaced with fear when I heard loud growls behind me. I turned around, and my eyes widened in horror as 3 brown wolves emerged from the woods. They appeared hungry, if not angry, as their eyes scanned me like a predator would a prey. I felt the fast beating of my heart. It made my legs weaken. Slowly, the wolves walked closer as I staggered backward. This made their ferocious growling get louder. I couldn't run, at least not in my human legs, as I would never outrun them. I didn't have a chance. I looked around me, hoping to find someone that could actually come to my rescue. But there was no one. My racing heart sped faster as the wolves stealthily approached me. My heart fell in defeat as I soon realized this could actually be it for me. The thought that I might actually die today sent my bones trembling against their joints. There was no way I could survive an attack from these wolves. They were huge and vicious, and I didn't have a wolf to aid my speedy recovery. I was doomed. The wolves snarled angrily and prepared to lunge at me. In a second, they leaped in the air, and I released a deafening cry, falling to the ground, and shutting my eyes. Immediately, a loud growl rippled through the air. I opened my eyes, and from nowhere, a big black wolf jumped in front of me. It was thrice the size of the former wolves. The wolf tilted his head and glanced my way as if inspecting me to see if I was hurt. His eyes were glowing a brighter shade of yellow than the sun. Killian. I recognized those gazes. His attention was pulled away by the growling that sounded from the wolves. They were more than ready for a fight. Killian's burning eyes found mine again, and suddenly, I heard his thundering voice in my head. "Run, Sheila! Run!" I was frozen on the ground. I wanted to move, but I couldn't get my legs into motion. Killian's hard gaze met mine again, and he yelled more frustratedly in my head. "Shift, now!" It was a command from my mate and Alpha, which I was obliged to obey. But that was something impossible to do. I couldn't shift. I didn't have a wolf, and Killian didn't know that. His eyes narrowed on me, confusedly, when the three wolves launched forward, pouncing on Killian. I let out a frightened cry. Killian's point of view I couldn't understand why I felt uneasy, my mind constantly going back to Sheila. Riker's restlessness kept intensifying, and it was driving me insane. I couldn't focus on my work properly, and I kept experiencing pain from the dark hole in my chest. It was unbearable. I left my office and headed to Thea's chamber, where I've been for several hours now. Being near her was usually like medicine to my soul. Somehow, her presence always seemed to make the pain from the cursed hole in my soul bearable. But these days, it was almost as if the dark hole had come alive, and nothing was working, not even Thea's presence. Not even the healer's potions. Nothing. I was on the bed with Thea beside me when I was mind-linked by Mason. His voice echoed within the walls of my mind in a frenzy. "Alpha, the pack is under attack." He rushed in a sentence. I jolted from the bed immediately. Thea was up beside me. "What?" I snatched my clothes from the floor, wearing them in a hurry. "Who are they?" "Rogues," he replied quickly. My eyes flashed rage. "Mason, get the warriors and head to the pack borders. We must stop them before they get into the pack." "All right, Killian," he disconnected with me. I mind-linked Adam together with the pack army, ordering them to spread out to the borders while some of the warriors swept through the pack, and the others should ensure the pack members were taken to safety. I was about to mind-link Alan when someone connected to me. Brielle's panicked voice flooded my mind. "Alpha." Something was wrong. Riker and I felt it. He had begun to growl angrily. "What is it?" I felt my chest tighten in a knot, awaiting her frenzied voice. "It's Luna," she. At the mention of Sheila, I cut her off, a strange emotion exploding within me. Fear. What happened to Sheila? I roared. I didn't even realize I was yelling aloud while speaking through the mind link. Someone sighted some rogues heading north to the garden, and Luna was there. RIA left her for only a second at the garden. I'm on my way there, but before Brielle finished her words, I cut her off again, my legs having a kind of life of their own, hastening to the door. I could hear Thea's voice speaking, but I could care less what she had to say. I needed to get to Sheila. She was in danger. The instant I reached outside, I gave Riker control and shifted into my gargantuan black wolf. We sprinted off, heading towards the pack garden. It was far away from the castle. Why did Ria take her that far? I wanted to lash out on her, but Riker growled in my head. This wasn't the time for that, human. He was right. This wasn't the time for that. I reached the pack's garden. From afar, my eyes zeroed in on Sheila. She was on the ground, circled by 3 roguish wolves who had already leaped into the air to attack her. Riker let out a powerful howl as he raced closer to Sheila. Riker's eyes went completely red. Without being told twice, he lunged at the wolf who was a second away from descending on Sheila. Riker's sharp claws pierced the wolf, and with his elongated canines, he bit another wolf, tossing them against the rough earth. We landed on our paws, and so did the 2 wolves who were already bleeding. The third one was beside them, glaring at my wolf. Riker took his stance in front of a terrified Sheila, tilting his head to inspect her body for any injuries. Thankfully, there was none. But Riker and I still felt the immense rage pumping in our veins at the rogues who dared touch what was ours. "Run, Sheila, run!" I sounded loudly in her head with Riker's voice. Her round blue eyes were stuck on mine. She was trembling really hard, but couldn't move a muscle. We felt the urge to wrap our arms around her, but I had guarded eyes on the wolves who had begun to move closer to us. "Sheila, shift!" It was a command that would force her wolf to control her, but nothing happened. She didn't shift, instead, more fear found her blue irises. "Sheila!" I called. She looked so scared, I wished I could rush to her side. I can't. I can't shift." She spoke quickly, which confused me. "What do you mean, you can't?" I wanted to ask, but now wasn't the time. I turned my bloodshot eyes on the wolves who lunged at me. In swift motion, I sent my claws deep into one of the wolves, tearing it up. I sent my canines into the head of the second, separating them from their bodies, while snapping the neck of a third. Many rogues emerged from the woods, and I kept fighting. Soon, Alan, Adam, and some of my pack warriors joined in the fight. "Get Sheila out of here!" I mind-linked Adam, and he nodded. From my peripheral vision, I saw Adam take Sheila away, and we continued fighting till every one of the rogues was dead. I shifted back into my human form, slipping into my shorts. I mind-linked Mason and Xavier, who were scattered around the pack with some warriors. "How's the situation over there?" I asked. "They are all dead. We are sweeping through the pack borders now. We will head back to the castle soon," Mason responded. I nodded, scanning the mess of the lifeless wolves on the ground. "I'm just confused. How did they manage to get past the pack's defenses?" Alan came from behind. "I have been thinking the same thing as well. The Crescent North Pack was the largest in the whole of the North Central, and our defenses were almost impenetrable. It baffled me how some mere rogues could get this far into the pack." I said honestly, I have no idea, Alan. I have a bad feeling about this. I swerved my attention to Jax, who was beside one of the dead wolves. You need to see this, Jax said, and I went to him. What is it, Jax? Here. He pointed to the symbol on the wolf's body, and immediately, my eyes flared up and my body stiffened. They all have the same symbol. Alan looked over the body of the dead wolf. I still haven't recovered yet. It's been over a decade since I saw that symbol. My father had one just like that. This isn't good. Why were they here? Does that mean Alan paused on his words? He was right. This was bad. That symbol belonged to the Dark Circle. They had sent the rogues, but why? It's been over a decade after the late Alpha's death since we cut ties with them. What do they want now? Clear up the bodies. I left the warriors, and headed back to the castle. Thankfully, the rogues were caught before they got further into the pack. We arrived at the castle and headed inside. Killian, Thea came crashing into my arms, her lips engulfing mine. I was so worried about you. Her worried eyes met mine. But mine went past her, scanning the room until it landed on Sheila. She was with Betrayal. Her gaze was on me, but she retracted it quickly. I looked away. Mason and Adam approached us, along with Valerie. Just the person I wanted to see. Valerie was a witch. She belonged to the Crystal Fortress Witches. The Crystal Fortress Witches were the oldest coven of witches, and the most powerful. But they were attacked 14 years ago, and many of them were murdered, while only a few managed to escape. Valerie was one of them. Did you see it? This wasn't a mere rogue attack. They were sent by the Dark Circle, she concluded. What do they want now? The only link that had existed between my pack and the Dark Circle was no more. And that was my father. They've been quiet for years, even off the raiders, since their attack on the Crystal Fortress. And the Black Blood Pack, Riker added. I didn't say anything. I hated remembering everything that happened that day and with my father. Nothing could change what happened to the Black Blood Pack, and nothing could ever change the hatred that existed between Leonardo Black, his brother, and me. We should talk inside, Valerie suggested, and I nodded. Alpha, I responded to Adam's call as he rushed up to me, a worried expression on his face and a brown paper in his hand. What happened? It's the council. On Adam's words, Valerie threw a sharp glance at me. Something happened, and it's bad. He handed the paper to me. I read through it swiftly, inhaling deeply. My eyes fell on Valerie, who held a knowing look. They are back. The Dark Circle. Sheila's point of view, it was already dawn. I woke up earlier than usual. I just couldn't get some sleep. My chest kept aching, and for some reason, I've been experiencing some headaches, which always lasted for a few hours. I was walking down the long hallway of the castle alone, wearing a long blue velvet dress. RIA had some patrolling to do for the day, and so did Betrayal. As for Killian, I was told that there was an important council meeting, so he left the castle at the first light of dawn, together with Mason, Alan, and Valerie. I have gotten much more used to my environment and life in the castle. I can't say it's comfortable, but it's bearable enough when I don't see Killian together with his lover. I've also made some friends in the pack. Right now, I'm supposed to be on my way to the dining hall to have my breakfast, but something caught my attention in the hallway on the other floor of the castle that I haven't been to yet. My curiosity got the better part of me, so I decided to explore it. It led me to a very old part of the castle. The surroundings looked old and scary, and the air here wasn't the usual warmth from the morning sunrise. It was cold. Very cold. There were burning torches hung on the wall. Their lights were very dim and they did much to illuminate the path. There were almost no windows, if there were any at all. The place gave me a creepy feeling, but I kept walking, despite feeling anxious. I stopped in front of an old-looking door. It was the only door in the hallway, and it was locked. Something caught my attention the most. I looked around but there wasn't a doorknob nor a keyhole to pull it open. That was strange. I placed my hand on it, inspecting the door for any other way it could get open, when suddenly, I heard it creaking and, to my surprise, the door opened. I was stunned, even worse, confounded. I looked behind me, but there was no one. My eyes shifted to the door, and I walked in cautiously. The inside was warm. A lot of candles were lit, and there were all sorts of books arranged on a wooden shelf. Weird-looking vases on the table. On the walls were strange markings in red and black. I felt drawn to them. The pad of my fingers trailed them on the wall. There were also a lot of flowers spread all over the room, a few trees in the corners, mistletoe on the ceiling, and a couch at the far end. It was a sight. It didn't have a spooky appearance, on the contrary, it seemed like it was a room inside a forest with a lot of trees and nature around. And the air in the room was powerful in a strange way. Weirdly, I felt safe and at home, but I couldn't tell why. I went to the wide circle table at the center of the room, my eyes taking in everything on it. Weird objects like knives have one mark on each side. They were intriguing. My eyes rested on a small wooden bowl, and inside was a thick red liquid. It looked more like blood. There was a book beside it. It was opened, and the page showed a large symbol in red, and on the top some words were written in red as well, the Crystal Fortress. I pulled my hand to touch it but jolted at the sudden voice that echoed. "Cripes! Don't touch that!" I spun around in fear, my eyes falling on the face of a familiar woman. Valerie. She was wearing a brown dress and a blue cloak over it. She hurried closer to me, and swiftly, she moved her fingers in the air, and the book in front of her closed without her even touching it. I remembered that Ria informed me she was a witch. She was in charge of the witch's quarters within the pack. I intentionally took a step backwards. "I am really sorry for barging in here." "I didn't. How did you get in here?" Valerie asked suddenly, but she didn't look upset that I had barged in without invitation. Her face held more of a surprised, confounded gaze. I decided to ditch the long story. "The door just opened," I said in honesty. Valerie froze for a second. Was I imagining it? Her gaze traveled to the door before meeting mine again. She looked a little bit lost. "But that's impossible," she whispered more to herself, but I heard. I quickly added, "I am really sorry." "It's nothing, Luna, it's just unusual that the door opened for you." Her eyes studied me briefly. But it's all right. I was only worried when you reached for the book. It's a little dangerous for non-witches. I glanced at the book cover, and on it a name was inked at the bottom. Fiona Black. I removed my eyes from it. I was just curious about this side of the castle. She kept staring at me, her face crippled, as if having some bizarre thoughts. Her stare at me wasn't creepy, but I couldn't deny that I felt a bit uncomfortable. I should get going now. I'm a little late for breakfast. With that, I managed to excuse myself out of that room. I found my way to the dining hall, and to my surprise, Killian's lover was already there, having her breakfast. There was no sign of Killian. I had expected him to be around for breakfast, since Valerie was back from the meeting with the council early in the morning. Killian had attended as well. Maybe his absence was a good thing. I wouldn't be able to bear seeing them together. Thea's heavy gaze pulled me out of my thoughts. I approached the table, taking ownership of one of the chairs. Her constant stare was still on me. I pulled my head up, my eyes meeting hers. This was the first time we were this close and alone. Other times she's either sucking Killian's face or throwing unreadable stares at me, like now. She regarded me with her brown eyes that showed nothing in their depth. She didn't like me, and I didn't like her either, but I barely had the strength to get into a fight with her. I shifted my gaze to my food instead. "What are you still doing here?" Her voice sounded far different from the cool and soft voice I was accustomed to hearing whenever she was with Killian. "Obviously, I'm having breakfast," I replied without looking at her. "You know, Killian will never accept a good-for-nothing like you. I am the one he's in love with and the only one that can save him and his pack." Her words drew my attention to her. What did she mean by the only one that could save Killian and the pack? I was confused by her words. The mocking laughter she released afterward informed me she could see the confusion imprinted on my face. Thea dropped the silver spoon from her hand and clasped her fingers together as she rose from her chair and moved to mine. "Killian doesn't love you, and he will never look your way as long as I'm in the picture. Isn't it obvious already? You're just a fool holding on to nothing." Her words stung a lot. Even though every word of hers was right, I hated the tone she was using on me. I dropped my spoon, looking her in the eye. "You are the one who is holding on to nothing. You are only an object he uses to warm his bed. I, on the other hand, I'm his mate, and the Luna of his pack." What I said seemed to have stung Thea well. But my own words had also pierced me. They were all lies, and I knew it. I was nothing to Killian. I meant absolutely nothing to him. Thea's brown eyes burned with fury. She was angry. I wasn't expecting it when her hand pulled up and collided with my cheek. I gasped, shocked that she could strike me. My eyes flashed on her and without thinking, I raised my hand and slapped her harder. That impact caused her to stagger on her shoes. I was surprised at where that strength came from. Thea's face was colored with rage, a murderous flash of hate, and something I couldn't decipher stalked her eyes. Thea angrily moved to me, but suddenly, a loud growl thundered, frightening both Thea and me. I looked to where it came from, Killian's hateful glares directed at me. In swift motion, he was before me, his large palm crashing harshly against my cheek, causing me to collapse on the floor. "My mate hit me." Third person's view. Killian sauntered towards Sheila, boring an angry glare at her. It made her freeze on the spot. Without warning, the back of his hand came into harsh impact with her cheek, and Sheila landed on the floor. Did he? Did her own mate just strike her? Get up, Sheila, he yelled, his tone angry and his gaze fixed on her. Sheila was shaking, tears pouring from her eyes. Even though she didn't respond, he fisted her hair and pulled her up. A cry of pain escaped her lips. Killian looked her in the eyes as he seemed ready to strike her again, but something flashed in his eyes. He couldn't decipher what it was. She just couldn't believe her own mate could strike her, and that too in the presence of the other woman, his lover. Deep waters gathered in Sheila's eyes, her gaze connecting with Killian's. She could see nothing in those amber crystals of his. Thea was quickly by his side. Killian, did you see? She slapped me, she said, crying, holding a hand to her cheek, and her eyes having a vicious glint. I warned you to stay out of Thea's way. That lover of yours slapped me first. Sheila was up on her feet. Enough. Thea is to be respected in her castle. He silenced her, Sheila. To your chamber, his dark glare absorbed her. Now. She was dumbfounded in her position, tears cascading down her eyes, until Ria rushed to her side, taking her away. Sheila's heart ached worse than ever, it was bruised, and the pain in her skull intensified the more. She fell down on her bed in tears. She couldn't stop crying. Sheila lay on her bed in tears for a few hours, like a teenager who had just gotten her heart broken, but it felt worse than that. Her mate, her very mate, had hit her. That was the last thing she expected from Killian, but then he did it. Her emotions were all over the place, and she could barely think straight. She closed her eyes firmly, making her mind up. Something she would have done long ago. A tear rolled down her eyes one last time as she decided to leave, to save herself before the strong feelings she had for her mate slowly consumed her. Sheila turned to Ria, who had just walked in with her dinner and some medicine for her constant headaches. Sheila felt exhausted, physically and mentally. As soon as she was done with her meal and had taken the medicine, she fell again onto her bed, feeling weak and drowsy. It was probably the medicine at work. Sheila heard Ria leave the room, shutting the door behind her. Before Sheila knew it, she had begun to fall asleep, her eyelids started giving way, and that's when she heard the sound of her door squeaking open and closing. She felt too weak to move or to even lift a finger. Sheila felt the covers on her shift lightly. Someone moved into the bed and wrapped an arm around her. Before she could think twice, she dozed off. Today was the Moon Goddess Festival, only held every 3 auspicious years. An auspicious day indeed. And while everyone was busy preparing for the grand feast, Sheila was rather busy plotting her escape. Tonight, the goddess was going to grant her the gift of freedom. Freedom from a mate who does not want her. Sheila's hand fell on her left cheek, where her mate hit her with so much disdain. It didn't hurt so much anymore, but the scars that remained were unseen. She had always dreamt and hoped to someday find her mate and in him be someone who would love and put her first, but Killian was rather the opposite of what she had in mind. Ah! A soft moan escaped from her lips, jogging her out of her long reverie. She was in her chamber, facing tall against the enormous mirror as Ria and two other helpers assisted her to put on her dress for tonight's ceremony. The dress was an uptight blue corset with long flowing ends. It indeed looked beautiful. "I'm sorry, my Luna," yelled the taller and fairer maid as she assisted her in tightening the ropes on her gown, bowing her head slightly and crossing her fingers. Sheila noticed just then on her wrist that there was a tattoo of two identical crescent moons facing back against each other. Sparing a quick look at Ria's wrist, she also had such a mark, and also the other maid with ginger red hair had similar markings. Now that she has thought about it, every wolf and member she has encountered within the Crescent North Pack all have similar markings. "It's okay and please don't call me Luna anymore." Sheila assured her that she responded with a courteous nod and continued with her duties. "Ria." She called for Ria's immediate attention. "Yes, Sheila." Ria muttered, looking up at her through the mirror with a huge smile. She seemed to be in a good mood. Sheila held a tight smile, knowing she would miss both Ria and Betrayal dearly when she escaped from the pack. "That mark, on your wrist, what is it?" Sheila asked curiously, pointing at Ria's wrist. "Oh, this. It's the mark of the pack. It symbolizes the pack and binds us all together. Basically, anyone who is a member of the pack has this imprinted on his or her wrist." She giggled, then continued stroking my hair. Just as she had thought, every member of the pack had it, further firming her decision that she did not belong here. She shook from her thoughts. Where is Killian? She couldn't help but wonder if he was still glued to that spawn of Satan's side as always, or maybe he was busy attending to the arriving guests from various packs. Ria replied, "He is at the feast attending to all the gathered wolves and alphas she passed, and Thea is also with him," she added carefully, cautiously informing Sheila of what she should be expecting. Sheila fought back the tears about to form. She thought to herself, just a few more hours and you're out. Okay. That's enough. You all can leave first. I'll be joining the feast soon. Sheila lay, smiling as they all nodded, exiting the chamber and leaving her alone with her plan. She wasn't planning on leaving with anything. This was meant to be as discreet as possible, so no extra belongings, just herself only. Soon, Sheila snuck downstairs in a blue woolen cloak, avoiding everything that moved in sight. Her hasty steps echoed loudly on the floor. She had been planning this escape for many days, so she had made herself accustomed to the shifting of the patrolling warriors in and outside of the castle. This was a lot simpler than expected, since almost everyone was distracted by the ceremony. After weaving her way through, soon enough she was out of the castle, running into the woods with only the glowing moonlight tailing above her. Killian stalked the floors, moving around the guests. His eyes were scanning through everyone. "Where's mate?" His wolf, Riker, growled, tired of waiting till he was near his mate. Something they both shared. As for his mate and Luna, she was supposed to be down already. His eyes rummaged all around for her but instead found Thea accompanied by Rowan, one of the very best and most trusted pack warriors, and behind them was Jax. Thea approached Killian in a glowing red corset gown with a graceful smile and stood next to him. "Thea," Killian called out to her, placing a kiss on her lips. She responded with her usual smile pasted on her face. "Where is Sheila?" Killian turned to Jax. He shook his head. I haven't seen Luna yet. Thea's smile immediately turned to a scowl. Clearly, she had many important things to do other than the feast. She is utterly unreliable and useless. She spoke calmly, but her sharp words only pissed off his wolf, Riker. Killian quickly mind-linked Alan to go look around and find Sheila. Even though Riker was protesting, he abandoned the feast in search of Sheila. He shook against it. Alan. Killian called his attention through the mind link, waiting for his response, which came rather quicker than expected. Yes, Alpha, Alan said through the mind link. Do you know where Sheila is? Killian questioned him through the mind link. No, Alpha, Alan replied, and after a moment, he added, Ria said she thought Luna joined you hours ago. She also doesn't know where she may be. A growl erupted from Killian's, causing Thea and a few of the guests to stare at him with questioning gazes and murmurs. He instantly sent them all death stares, silencing them. Alan, find her. Killian ordered through the mind link, clenching his fist. Where is Sheila? You drove my mate away, Riker said, which irritated him even more. Relax, Killian, everyone can tell you're angry at something, Thea whispered into his ear with an unwavering smile plastered on her face. Riker growled in his mind, and it took Killian every ounce of control not to snap at her. All that mattered was finding Sheila. Sheila carefully navigated her way through the guards that remained in the castle, as she ran as fast as she could, her cloak trailing behind her. She had an unsettling feeling crawling in the pit of her stomach. Although she had made it out of the castle where her mate and his rotten lover dwelled, she couldn't help but feel like she was being followed and watched closely by unseen eyes. Sheila flung her head backwards but failed to see her stalker. It was dark and at night, which served as great camouflage for her devious stalker. She couldn't see them. She ran, heading for the forest. She is headed for the forest. Didn't she know about all the terrors that lay in wait in the dark forest? Sheila's stalkers whispered to themselves, somewhat surprised by her foolish actions. Hopefully she doesn't make it out of this forest alive. If she is out of his way, that would make my plans much simpler to achieve. A wicked grin formed on the lips of Sheila's stalker as they thought. Soon enough, they finally exploded into a dangerous laughter. Sheila's point of view: the sounds of owls hooting and insects chirping were all around me in the gentle night air, and the moon shone in its full glory, illuminating every path and step I took. After much time, I realized that I had been lost, walking round and around in circles. Where am I now? I thought to myself, confused. Now I was running up north in hopes of finding some trail leading out of this forsaken forest. Quickly, I stopped in my tracks. Although I hadn't yet discovered my wolf, I had a better than average sense of hearing. I wasn't alone now. Someone was indeed in this forest with me. I tense up, grabbing the small dagger I held for protection, gripping on tightly to it like it was my only form of lifeline. I wandered into the forest all alone at night. Somehow, I had a feeling that whatever and whoever was in this forest with me wasn't coming in peace. Hello, is there anyone out there? I inquired, spinning my head around in search of whatever was present with me. Hi, I heard an almost angelic, soft voice say from behind me. Startled by the voice, I turned around to face a pair of surreal emerald green eyes staring right at me with wrinkled eyebrows. I screamed, "You almost ripped my heart right out of my chest." I swallowed some air, regaining my composure and stance. My bad, that wasn't really my intention. I was passing through and I noticed someone taking what seemed like a midnight stroll around the forest. Are you crazy? Do you have a death wish or something? You should know you shouldn't be out here alone at night. His emerald green eyes searched the place. He had slick black long hair that was trimmed right below his ear and a well-chiseled jawline. First of all, I'm not insane. I saw him roll his eyes while he murmured something. I'm just not really sure what it was. And secondly, what makes you think that I was just taking a stroll? I was trying to run away, I retorted, not lowering my small dagger held to my chest. Well, whatever it may be, we better leave right now, unless you want to end up dead, he suggested, still looking around a bit frantically. What exactly do you mean? No, who are you? I asked, getting confused about what was actually going on. The buzzing sound of flies was growing nearer. I'm afraid there's not much time for that, they are approaching, he said, placing his hand at the head of his sword and studying the environment. I had a lot of unanswered questions. Who was he and what was coming? I don't understand what was happening. My words were brought to an abrupt stop by the sound of his sword unsheathed. They are here. He looked straight at me with his emerald green eyes. Who is here? I quickly asked him. He looked at me like I had asked the most stupid question he had ever heard. Don't you know where you are? When I couldn't reply, he shook his head. This forest belongs to some rogues. Believe me when I say they are dangerous. He looked around again. They're coming, we need to move now, he replied. Rogues were coming? How could he tell? Before I could ask, his green eyes shut me up. We do not have the time for unnecessary questions, we need to get moving now, he said. A series of howls went off from all around us, and jumped behind him. I suggest you shift into your wolf and start running and don't look back, he yelled quickly after pushing me out of the way and shifted into his wolf, his eye changing from its usual green gemstone color to a golden yellow color, reminding me of someone I'd rather not think of. It was his fault I'm in this situation. I obeyed the green-eyed stranger. But since I couldn't shift, I ran for my life. I could hear his wolf trailing behind me, accompanied by howls of the rogues that wanted us for dinner, but that was seconds ago. Now he was out of sight and I was left alone with the thick canopies of trees surrounding me. Oh, goddess! I obviously didn't think this escaping through. I heard a loud painful howl. I wasn't sure, but it seemed it came from the stranger. The wolves might have surrounded him, or maybe injured him. I was confused whether to keep running or go back and probably die alongside him since I could barely help in any way. I felt utterly useless. I had to go back to try and help him. If he was harmed because I didn't even try to do something, I wouldn't be able to forgive myself. So, I stopped in my tracks and headed right back. I heard growling coming from behind me and immediately, I was blocked by a big grey wolf. I snatched a wood lying on the ground, and hit the wolf, but it didn't back away. It came closer to me, cornering me up against a tree trunk, growling at me with sharp canines. It was later joined by 2 other wolves that had the same intent: to kill their prey. "Get away, me!" I screamed, using my dagger to point at them all in a rather pathetic attempt to stop them from attacking me, which was failing because they kept advancing toward me. "I'm faced up," I thought as the wolves made progress in getting close to me. "No. Stay back." I continued struggling, but I knew it was just a matter of seconds before I was brutally attacked and killed. Just then, one of the wolves growled and lunged at me. I looked away, covering my eyes with my hands, bracing myself for the inevitable horror that awaited me. But instead, I heard a snapping noise. Quickly, I opened my eyes and saw the now dead rogue wolf laying on the ground with its head chopped off. And standing above me was a big brown wolf, the stranger, whatever his name was. Strangely, this scene and this wolf reminded me of Killian. He mightily growled at the 2 remaining wolves, causing them to growl an equally frightening response. Another wolf attacked the brown wolf, which he easily brushed off with his claws and, in return, severed its head. My stomach churned at the gory scene. The grey wolf and the brown wolf began circling each other, both growling loudly. After stalking and circling, they both attacked each other, sending several hits, but lastly, the brown wolf pinned it to the ground, growling, and the grey wolf whimpered in submission and it was killed. He then shifted back into his human form. "I thought I told you to shift and then run, and not to look back," he said, changing into some clothes. "I didn't see you behind me, so I became worried and, against my better judgment, I came back for you," I said, dusting my clothes. "I suggest you shift into your wolf and start running and don't look back," he yelled quickly after pushing me out of the way and shifted into his wolf, his eye changing from its usual green gemstone color to a golden yellow color, reminding me of someone I'd rather not think of. It was his fault I'm in this situation. "Ah, isn't that so sweet?" he said with a light chuckle. I rolled my eyes at him but found myself smiling just a bit. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" I asked, inching closer to him. He had some blood on him, but I could tell it wasn't his. I just wanted to be sure he was okay. "No, I am not hurt. The rogues were no match at all. But you look shaken up. Let's just camp and rest for tonight," he suggested, and I acknowledged with a nod. I felt mentally and physically drained tonight from all the running for my life. It was wise to camp and rest, then continue with my journey the next day. "Stay here, I'll go gather some wood." He smiled, walking away to do that which he said. He arrived shortly and he started a fire. While we sat there in silence, I kept looking at him. There was something about him that felt eerily familiar. "You know it's considered rude to stare, right?" He laughed, looking up at me, making my face turn red in shame. "Sorry," I quickly apologized. "It's okay. It happens quite a lot," he said with a proud smirk, which made me scoff. "And thank you. You know, I didn't really get to say that earlier," I stated, feeling grateful for him saving my life. I wonder what would have happened if I had not run into him. I would have been dead for sure. "No worries. By the way, what is your name and what are you doing out here?" "I'm Sheila and I was running away from my mate," I replied, remembering that I needed to get away from here as soon as possible before Killian and his pack found out. I haven't heard that before. What happened now? What did he do? He asked, looking genuinely interested. It's what he didn't do. He doesn't love me and disregards me as his mate. To make it even worse, he has a lover, I replied to him, looking down to the ground. Well, whoever he is a fool if he lets you go. I laughed at his words, earning a confused look from him. What? He asked. Nothing, just the first time I've seen anyone address an alpha in such a manner. I tried to suppress my laughter. So, he is an alpha. Of what pack? He asked me. Alpha Killian of the Crescent North Pack, I stated. His green eyes widened for a second, nodding. His eyes twinkled with something in them. Was it amusement? I see, was all he said. I decided to ask some questions of my own. It's your turn. Who are you, and what are you doing here? My name is Morgan. Unlike you, I was actually returning to a place I haven't visited for a long time. His voice lowered a bit, and he seemed to have drifted unto his thoughts. I guess we all have our stories. It's almost daylight, let's sleep and reserve our energy for tomorrow. Then we'll see what we can do about your situation, he said suddenly, lying down. Somehow his last words confused me. Good night, Sheila. His green eyes on me. And it's really a pleasure meeting you, he said, confusing me all the more. Sheila's point of view. I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring at the beautiful work of nature. It was the first light of dawn, and the sun was barely rising. Birds were flying high, chirping a beautiful morning melody. The sight was simply exquisite. And he was there, beside me. I could feel his strong minty breath brushing against my neck with his strong arms wrapped around me, imprisoning me in his arms. I felt Killian's rugged hands on my soft and milky skin as I squirmed under his touch. The sensation of sparks coursing through every bone in my body, and my moans and gasps escaped my lungs, filling the air. He fell beside me, scooping me into his arms. The spark that ignited at the contact of our bodies felt so surreal. But I knew better. This was only a dream. Wakey wakey. A familiar voice sounded not too far from me. It was Morgan, the stranger that saved me from the rogues who tried to attack me last night. I'm awake, I yawned, physically waking up from my sleep. It was already dawn, and the sun was radiating in all its full glory. You sure do sleep a lot. Morgan smiled, putting out the fire from last night. Having a good dream? Are you? He asked with a laugh. I fought the blush that nearly exposed me. Much more like a horrible nightmare, honestly, I lied, the details of my dream still vivid in my mind. It was a pleasant dream. Oh, goddess, I'm still in the forest and I bet Killian has already noticed my absence and he and his pack are already scouting all over the place. Well, that would be if he even cares. What if he is even thrilled at the idea of my escape? That would hurt. Sheila, don't think about that, all you need to do is get far away from here and forget about him. I scolded my thoughts mentally. A nightmare? Tell me more about it on the way, Morgan said, looking around, trying to figure out the fastest route to take to get out of here. Probably. Where do we go from here? I asked, now standing and facing him. Well, didn't you say you wanted to get far away from the forest? He questioned. Yet, I said, answering his question. Then don't worry about anything, and just trust me. He smiled at me, nudging his head right. The exit is this way, he said as he started walking, and I followed. We had been walking for less than an hour, or maybe more. As we strode, I told him all the stories about my mate and his lover. While all he did was laugh. He always found something funny about what I said. I wonder what it was actually. Oh, this route seems familiar, I said, taking in how eerily familiar this path seemed. Are you sure we are on the right path? Yeah, very sure. I use this path all the time. It's a shortcut, you see. He turned to me, chuckling. My brother and I used to run through here back in the days, he said, sounding a bit sad at the last words. I didn't know you had a brother. I inquired, instantly realizing that I knew nothing about him. Apart from the fact that he is a werewolf and goes by the name of Morgan, I knew nothing more about him. But for some strange reason, I trusted him. You didn't know because you never asked. Oh, Sheila, there is so much more that you don't know about me, Morgan said with a dangerous smirk. Why don't you tell me about your brother? I asked, wanting to know more. We haven't been in touch for a very long time, Morgan said, with a gloomy expression. I was about to ask him a very important question. Why? Why had he and his brother stopped talking? What happened? But my questions were brought to a complete standstill when I saw the high decking of the castle roof. It was Killian's. I couldn't possibly be back to the Crescent North Pack. No. 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 I gasped in disbelief. Why did we come back here? Morgan said we were taking a shortcut out of the forest, but instead he led me back here. To my mate, but why? A crazed thought popped up. Was he sent by Killian to find me and to lead me back to him? You lied to me. All this while, you knew who my mate was. Did Killian send you? I sparked, angrily, getting mad at myself for trusting a stranger. As if I could care less about Killian. He chuckled but wasn't smiling. He must have noticed that I was on to his treachery. I did this for you. Sheila, I have a very good explanation for this. Trust me, Morgan quickly let out, while looking at me. You swine. You just tricked me and you expect me to trust you. How foolish do you think I can be? I yelled at him. The bitter and painful feeling of being betrayed stung me hard. I turned to leave before someone found me. But quickly, Morgan gripped my arm. Not too fast, little wolf. I'm only doing all this for your good, so would you please calm down? He tickled his brow, before sighing. Please, Morgan pleaded, placing his right hand in his thick black hair. He claims that he did it all for my good. Liar. I don't understand how taking me back to my mate that I ran away from was for my good. It didn't take too long, and we were surrounded by Killian's pack warriors. About 20 of the Crescent North pack wolves completely circled us, including Rowan, Mason, and Alan. I was trapped. There was no escape from this one. Only the goddess knew what was going to happen next. I could see Killian approaching us with an angry scowl. If it were to be possible for looks to kill, then I bet I would be dead and bleeding all across the ground. He looked pissed as he stood before me. What was going to become of me now? Sheila! He growled, but as soon as his gaze fell upon Morgan, my companion, he fell silent, and his face portrayed what I could only discern as confusion and shock. Why was he shocked to see Morgan? Didn't Killian send him to bring me back? I looked at Morgan, who stood beside me, and he had a knowing smirk on. "Hello brother, miss me?" Morgan said with a smile, and all Killian responded with was a low-key growl. He didn't seem pleased to see Morgan. Oh, good goddess, Killian and Morgan were brothers. That would explain the strange familiarity I saw in Morgan. They both shared the same blood running through their veins and a resemblance too. It's just been clarified. That would make Killian the brother Morgan spoke about, the same one he hasn't spoken to for so long. Betrayal. Killian called out for Betrayal without taking his fixed gaze off Morgan, who also did the same thing. Betrayal walked forward. Yes, Alpha Killian. She was looking at him. Escort Sheila back to her chamber and make sure she remains there. Is that clear? Killian said, his gaze still unmoved from his brother. Betrayal moved to my side, leading me forward, her eyes looking as though she was trying to convey a message to me but couldn't right now. I followed her without complaining, sparing one last look at my mate and his brother. Oh, this wouldn't end well for me. Killian's point of view: Sheila had been missing for hours, and no one had seen her leave the castle, but that was all over when Alan mind-linked me, informing me that my mate, Sheila, had been found. "Mate has returned," Riker said. I could feel him growl in excitement. It was a great relief that she was found. I don't know what I would have done if she hadn't been found, or worse, if something bad had happened to her. I immediately rushed to meet her. There she stood. She looked really tired and her brown hair was a mess, but she looked pretty. I felt the urge to pull her in for a long hug, but those thoughts completely went up in flames as soon as I saw who her companion was. It was Morgan. My little brother. He has returned, but why? And most importantly, what was he doing with my mate? A surge of anger took over me as I walked towards both of them, my gaze unmoved from Morgan. "Hello brother, miss me?" He spoke with a smirk plastered on his face. "For reasons I really wish I could forget, we haven't seen each other in a long time. We needed to talk, alone with no interruptions." My gaze fell on Sheila, who looked surprised to find out Morgan and I were brothers. "Betrayal," I called out, and she answered almost instantly. "Escort Sheila back to her chamber and make sure she remains there. Is that clear?" I ordered, while Betrayal nodded, taking Sheila away. We all returned back to the castle, and now it was only me and Morgan that remained. "Why are you back?" I asked, cutting and getting straight to the point. "He must have returned for a reason. Killian, your brother finally returned, and the first thing you ask is, why am I back?" "Don't be so cruel," he said, with a smile. "That wasn't answering my question, Morgan," I sounded, getting annoyed with his response. "I came back to be around my brother." "Why? Am I not allowed to do that anymore?" He laughed, but I found it hard to believe he just came back after all this time just to see me. There was something else he had in mind, as there always was. I still can't forget all that happened the last time he was here. What were you doing with my mate? I asked, wondering why he was around her. Your mate? That is quite different from what she told me. He had an amusing smirk on. It was irritating. But I couldn't help but wonder what Sheila must have said about me. I sighed, knowing it will be all but good. I ran into her in the forest, and then we were attacked by a bunch of vicious rogue wolves. She is really too kind but very angry at you. What did you do to her to cause her to run away from you the first chance she got? Morgan said with a laugh. He sure was having fun. That's nothing you should be worried about. Just stay away from her. Is that clear? I said, not wanting to discuss my mate with him, but, for what it is worth, I was thankful for him being around to protect her. Sure, whatever you say, brother, he said, I'm really tired from my travels. I need time to rest now. I mean it, Morgan. I warned him. Yet, whatever Morgan said, leaving my office. I took a deep breath, heading to Sheila's chamber. Sheila's point of view. I was alone in my room, fixated on the edge of the bed. I still haven't recovered from the shock that Morgan was Killian's brother. I knew it was only a matter of time before Killian came charging through the door. Oh my God! He will never forgive me for trying to escape. I felt my pulse plummeting, my heart striking so fast that it caused me to breathe heavily. I vibrated in fear at the rough manner in which the door burst open. But I forced my body to stop trembling, my eyes slowly moving to Killian. I pressed my lips tightly together to stop the whimpers that wanted to be heard while under his dark, menacing glare. Killian stalked towards me, each heavy step of his leaving a hard thud in my chest. I felt my headaches intensify. He was before me, glaring hard, his breathing labored. In a flash, he reached for me, pinning me in his arms, shooting cold glares at me. How dare you, were his words. They held an unmistakable rage. His veins were out. I couldn't speak, I didn't know exactly what to say. His grip on me tightened, and swiftly I felt my back against the cold, unfeeling wall, but Killian's hold on me was anything but rough. Answer me, Sheila. He growled, frustratingly, his eyes sinking into my soul. Aside from being angry, he was frustrated and in pain. But why? Shouldn't he be happy that I helped him get rid of me? But I didn't voice my sentiments. I gasped. As his lips hovered on mine, I could feel his heated breath, his scent possessing me while his body pressed hard on mine. His eyes darkened with desire and need. I felt a similar emotion shoot through my blood. The air around us was charged with an unfamiliar electricity. How dare you try to escape from me? Why do you care? I managed to bite out, trying to hold on to my fading sanity. I didn't want to give in, it always ended up with me being miserable and in tears. I don't belong to you, Killian. I curse the moon goddess for binding me to you. His eyes flashed red. Suddenly, he smirked. You are wrong, mate. He drew closer, his gorgeous smirk deepening, but I fought myself from giving in. You do belong to me. Killian's finger trailed my round face. I snatched my face from his burning touch. He forcefully grabbed my face, but his hold was light and somewhat gentle in contrast to his glares. Killian leaned closer, and his lips brushed mine slowly. It caused a gasp to leave my lips. "Your soul and your body are all mine." His words sent anger into my bones. "Never, Killian, as long as you have a lover, I'll never be yours, and I won't stop trying till I'm finally out of this you've trapped me in." The look in his eyes gave me great satisfaction. I saw a flicker of hurt. I tried sidestepping him, but he gripped me, pushing me onto the bed. He was on top of me. Swiftly, Killian kissed me, possessively. His tongue was tasting my mouth and his lips were assaulting mine. I was barely able to keep up with him. The feeling of pleasure exploded within me. I wanted to have my hands on his body, but my logical reasoning was kicking against it. I forced myself out of this madness. I couldn't just keep kissing him when he clearly didn't want me. I wouldn't stoop that low. I shouldn't. I placed a hand on his chest to try and push him away, but he only firmed his kisses. My body was becoming too hot, and it was getting difficult to breathe. My stomach stirred with a fluttering feeling, and suddenly, somewhere between my legs demanded attention, Killian's attention. I tried to close my legs, but Killian noticed my action. I wanted all of him inside me. "Killian, please, don't stop." I clutched onto his neck like my life depended on it. His lips feasted on my neck, then on my ears. "You belong to me, Sheila. I alone am capable of making you feel this way. Your moans and body belong to me." I nodded hastily. His rhythm picked up at an insane speed that caused my legs to tremble, and the area between my legs turned moist. "That's right, baby. You're all mine." Killian was out of breath as well. He whispered in my ears, pleasing my body. I felt my nails dive into his flesh as I felt myself explode. I was breathing hard, my body in a frenzy, my legs shaking. Killian was unmoving, still on me. He pulled his head to mine, allowing me to gaze into his eyes. They were beautiful, and they seemed to want me as much as I wanted him. Immediately, his lips broke into a smirk, pecking my lips. His haughtiness reminded my soul of my rage. "Get off of me." My mind was clearer now. I mustered the courage and pushed him off of me. He pulled away. "Whatever you say, mate." He was still smirking, infuriating me greatly. "And next time you get some crazy idea of escaping, think twice about it." He scanned my body once more, before he stormed out of my chamber. I sighed, falling onto the bed. I couldn't believe what just happened between Killian and I. My body was still in a frenzy. I hated Killian the more for being able to make me feel this way. "I hate you, Killian Reed," I whispered to myself, deep down doubting my own words. Sheila's point of view. The next morning, I was already awake, and the feeling of Killian's body still lingered on my skin. I still couldn't move past that moment. I hated the inevitable truth that as much as I hated the insane fact that Killian affected me, shamelessly, I craved more of his touches. I sighed, embarrassed by my thoughts. I have been locked in my room since I was led back by that traitor known as Morgan. To be honest, this wasn't what I expected to happen to me when I was caught. Normally, it was considered a heinous crime for a Luna to flee, abandoning her pack and mate, but thankfully, I wasn't even locked up in the dungeon or severely punished. That's a relief. My doorknob clicked open, causing me to jump up from bed at light speed. I watched the door open, leading me to Ria, my best friend. Sheila, she said, with a streak of concern evident in her voice as her chocolate brown eyes shimmered. Ria, I called after her, standing up as we met for a long hug. You gave me a huge scare when you went missing. I was afraid something bad happened to you, she said as we sat on the edge of my bed. I know, I'm sorry, I apologized to her with a smile. Next time you intend on running away, do me a favor and tell me, then I'll accompany you. She smiled widely, as we both laughed. Maybe, but I doubt that I will be running away ever again, since it didn't work out well the last time. How are you? The whole pack went crazy looking for you when you left. Even the Alpha went crazy with worry. He was the first to notice your absence, she said, shocking me with the last part of her statement. Killian was worried about me? And he was the first to notice I was gone. I never would have guessed it. He always seemed to not even pay much attention to my existence. And I always imagined that Ria would be the first to notice my absence. Killian was worried about me? I asked, still feeling unsure of what I had just heard. Yes, very much. He didn't even stop for a second to rest till you were found, she confirmed, making me somehow feel happy on the inside that he at least cared and not the opposite. Quick, you need to get ready for breakfast immediately, Ria informed me, leading me and helping me get ready and dressed for breakfast. After taking a hot bath, I got dressed in a beautiful flowery dress picked out by Ria herself. I was all ready and headed for breakfast with Ria when I saw Morgan, seemingly heading to my chamber. He had a bright smile, which I responded to with a frown. Good morning, Sheila, he beamed. I replied to him with a hateful glare. I was still so mad at him for betraying me and even more at him for lying to me and not telling me that he was Killian's brother, even when I ran my mouth and lamented all my problems to him. Oh, don't tell me you are still angry at me about what happened yesterday, he said, smiling. I trusted you and you betrayed me, leading me back to your brother. Why didn't you tell me that you and Killian were brothers? I spoke. His betrayal and lies hurt me deeply. I had to admit it. Although he had claimed that he did it for my good, I still found it so absurd to believe. It would be the same as stabbing me in the back and then telling me that it was all for my benefit. I was going to eventually tell you who I was, but if I did, you wouldn't have wanted anything to do with me, and I would have told you if you asked, he said, raising his brow. He did have a point, though. I would have wanted to run away from him the second I knew who he truly was, and I never really asked about his story. Maybe I was wrong to judge him so harshly. After all, he has been nothing but kind to me. So why did you bring me back here? I asked him, crossing my arms. Don't worry, you will figure that out later. Are you still mad at me? He asked, making a puppy dog face. He looked really cute right now, making it impossible to be mad at him. I said, laughing, just don't do that again, promise. Morgan placed his hand over his chest, crossing it. Cross my heart and hope for a merciful death, he stated as we both burst out in laughter. Let's get going for breakfast, Killian behaves like a grouchy toad towards tardiness." I laughed at Morgan's words, which he used to describe Killian. He was the first I have ever seen that wasn't afraid of saying what he thought about the all-feared Alpha. Even my father was hesitant to discuss the Alpha in such terms. As we arrived at the dining hall, the servants were busy serving breakfast to Killian and Thea, who sat on the seat adjacent to him with a smile. Ugh! I hated seeing her scrawny-looking face. Although I hated to admit it, she was far from ugly, she was beautiful. Her jet black hair was decorated with ornaments, giving highlights to her naturally pale face. But all her beauty was sadly infused with bitterness. I took a seat opposite Thea, while Morgan was seated beside me. "Look who decided to join us for breakfast. If it isn't the runaway Luna of the Crescent North Pack." Before I could even get a chance to take a bite of my sumptuous breakfast, Thea decided to spew her venom on me. "You should be ashamed of yourself," Thea added. She seemed pleased with herself and her words. "Why should I be? After all, I have done nothing wrong. If anyone in this room should be ashamed, it's you. After all, you are the one that serves as nothing but a plaything for Killian, so shut up," I retorted at her, getting her to keep quiet for a moment. She was super annoying. "You should watch the way you speak to me," she exclaimed, seemingly hurt. I must have hit her where it hurt, and that gave me lots of ideas. "What? I was just telling you the truth. You mean nothing more to the pack, so just stop lying to yourself." "It's embarrassing," I said, finally taking a bite of my food. "If I may add, it tasted good." "How dare you say that to me?" she said. She was fuming mad. You could tell by the killer look she shot at me. I bet if you looked closely, you could see smoke flying out of her ears. "What happened, Thea? Can't take what you dish." Morgan let out a chuckle, drinking a sip from his cup. For once, it felt good to know I wasn't alone in my fight against Thea. Now I have Morgan. "So, you are defending her? I wonder what she must have done to have you speak for her. Tell me, did she pleasure you with her body? Such a tramp." Thea spoke but was stopped by Killian in mid-sentence. "Enough, Thea. All of you keep quiet." Killian growled, causing Thea to flinch a bit. "Don't you think you're completely off the hook now that you've returned?" Killian turned to me. "You are the Luna of the pack. Running away is a punishable offense," he added, sending chills down my spine the way his gaze took me in. My body reacted stupidly to his face, getting turned on. There was a dark, knowing glint in Killian's eyes. I looked away, my cheeks coloring up. "You will be locked up in your room till you learn to behave as a Luna should," he said coldly. We ate the rest of our breakfast in silence. I was the first to finish. Immediately I was done, I made my way to my chamber before being told to. It's been exactly 3 days since I have been locked up in my room. I wasn't allowed by Killian to leave my chamber. The only companion I had with me was Ria, and she only made time to visit me when she was less busy, and well, Morgan too. We had gotten quite close during this time. We often met up at night so he could train me to be better at fighting. I grew to know a lot about him. He is funny and cool to hang out with. I haven't seen Killian all this time, and I'm kind of glad too. I couldn't trust my traitorous body from misbehaving. Ria had just paid a visit to the pack's physician for me. Lately, I have been feeling quite queasy. My head has been pounding so hard as if it was about to just pop up and explode. It has also been strange how I keep hearing whispers, not even able to make out what they say, but it is driving me further to the edge of insanity. I don't know how much more I could take. I just hoped this new medication prescribed to me by the physician would help. It was my last hope. Sheila's point of view. I stepped out of the castle into the morning sunrise, its warmth seeping into my body. I was with Betrayal, waiting for Morgan before joining the others at the stable. Morgan joined us soon enough, and the three of us gated to the stables. Many of the pack members were already on their horses. My eyes scanned around and they fell on Killian. He was as usual with Thea, helping her on her horse. I wanted to look away before he caught me staring, but instantly, his perfect amber eyes met mine. Quickly, I looked away. Honestly, I've been avoiding him, and so has he. But I have grown used to that, especially with Morgan's company. He's been literally a good friend to me. I wonder why Killian doesn't get along with him. That doesn't surprise me though. Killian never gets along with anybody. The only person he ever seems to crack a smile around is that star. Just at the thought of that, I felt a nagging pain in my head. I've gotten quite used to the pain already, and the medicine Ria gave me has been helpful. At least it releases the pain for some hours, but then the headaches and consistent whispers start again. I moved to the horse that had been prepared for me, while Betrayal went to her mate, Alan. You need some help. I turned to Morgan as his voice reached my ears. I've got this. I jumped on my horse, and so did Morgan on his. Most of the pack members had begun riding west, most of who were ranking old wolves of the pack. Killian and his lover were at a distance, riding as well, and I was with Morgan. We were going hunting, heading west to the mountains, which were also part of Killian's territory. I was told this was a kind of tradition that had existed for the longest time in the pack. A penny for your thoughts, Morgan voiced beside me, his hair swaying in the air. I really don't know what I'm doing here, it's obvious I'm not needed around here, I voiced my thoughts. Don't get me wrong, everyone has been incredulously nice to me, but that's just it. They held Thea delicately in high regard. I really don't know what I did to deserve this kind of fate. You are the pack's Luna and my brother's mate, he said, ticking his brows. It made me laugh. Somehow, he always managed to do that. I've never seen anyone address the notorious and most feared Alpha with those kinds of words. But Morgan didn't care at all. And it's slowly rubbing off on me. Last night, I could barely get enough sleep. Morgan stayed up with me all night, along with Betrayal and Ria. We chatted for a while he continued training me since I'm basically not supposed to do anything in the castle. Killian's own words. We had ridden far into the mountains, towards the forest. Some of the pack members had begun to hunt for some forest animals. Killian was with them, and of course, Thea, who just could not keep her hands to herself. She was doing it on purpose, to get me riled up, but I chose not to care. Something else engulfed my thoughts. It came from the thick trees in the forest. I halted my horse, looking around. I couldn't see anything, but I could swear someone, somewhere was watching me. I kept moving, now looking for Morgan, who was with Alan when I noticed a ferocious shadow running through the trees. I looked up ahead, to a far distant place where some hunting members were headed. There was no sign of Morgan, Alan, or Killian. Something in me kicked in, and I navigated my horse, riding in the direction where the shadow skillfully raced through. I knew I was being a little too reckless, but my chest tightened into a knot. I had a bad feeling. I reached far into the direction I saw the shadow disappear. The tall trees formed canopies, impeding sunlight from properly peering down. The sound of rustling trees drew my attention, so I rode in its direction. Jumping off my horse, silently, I followed through the narrowed path, and a figure came into my view. Killian. What are you doing alone out here? He asked, sharply. Why do you care? Aren't you supposed to be with your lover? I shot back, and I caught the smile that slothfully strolled across his lips. I see someone woke up a little too feisty. He strolled closer to where I stood with my horse. Jealousy doesn't look good on you, mate. I hated the way he always quoted that word. Jealous, as if. I scoffed, taking a cautious step backward before I did something I would definitely regret. You give yourself way too much importance. Frankly, I don't give an actual f*k about you. Oh, really now, he said as he approached. The light breeze around now carries his manly scent and musk. Go back to your lover now. I need to get back to Morgan. His eyes flashed something I never thought I'd see in him. Jealousy. Stay away from him, he sounded in a warning tone. Why? Is it because he's much better than you? I folded my hands across my chest. I felt Killian's amber irises dilate, falling to my chest. I followed his gaze to my chest, where my folded hands made me pop up. I quickly removed my hands. Killian's eyes had already darkened. Emotions swirled up in his eyes, a mixture of jealousy and primal desire. He just stood there for a moment, taking me in, his eyes slowly scanning my body from head to toe. Killian was in front of me. My body trembled under his hungry gaze. These lips of yours will get you into trouble. Killian's padded thumb brushed my lips seductively. You are driving me insane. His voice vibrated in a deep, throaty whisper. He grabbed my waist with his hand, digging me into his chest, then his lips came down on mine. My body shook uncontrollably at the emotions of having Killian's lips on mine. He backed me up against a tree, his lips kissing me with a needy hunger like I was the very lifeline he needed, his own air and life. When I felt his erection pressed up against me, I gasped breathlessly. Killian used the opportunity to stick his tongue down my throat, sucking and tasting me. Killian's lips moved on mine without control, like a man who was hungry for me only. His breathing was hard and rapid. I couldn't keep up with him. I had to pull away from his kisses to allow myself some air. To my surprise, Killian didn't stop there. His firm hands held my body, pinning me against the tree while my legs wrapped around his waist. He bent his head to my neck, his nose grazing my neck, leaving a trail of hot, feathery kisses as my body vibrated against him. All sanity completely absconds from me. I gripped his shirt, subtle moans protruding from my lips in an alien voice that I couldn't remember as mine. Love, I heard him murmur frustratedly against my neck, as a hot sensation burned in the pit of my stomach, making me all warm and wet inside and needy for him. Killian's hold on me tightened. I couldn't think clearly anymore. I abandoned that ship a long time ago. I just needed Killian, only Killian. I wanted him, and I didn't care if he took me in right here and now. I could bet he could smell my arousal already, and I didn't care. I felt like if he didn't touch me now, I might just die. His dark eyes, blinded with desire and need, scanned my face. When the cry of a twig stepped upon broke the moment. Killian instantly released a loud growl, furiously snapping his head in the direction where the noise came from. It was Alan. My eyes rounded, and my cheeks colored up with embarrassment as I began to fix my dress. Killian growled at Alan, covering me with his large body. "Get out from here!" That growl should have frightened anyone, but Alan seemed more surprised and amused than terrified. With a sarcastic, "Whatever you say" look, he went back along the path he came from. Killian turned his gaze on me. I didn't want to, but now that my sanity seemed to have returned, I pushed him away, but he barely budged. The dark desires were still present in his eyes as his large thumb brushed against my lips as if seducing me back into a blissful utopia. Killian, stop!" My words were meant to escape, to have more control than the careless whisper they seemed to have adopted. "Stop! Go back to your lover!" At the mention of the last word, he froze, almost as if remembering something from the moment had ripped away from him. Like a dash of icy water had been poured on him, Killian pulled away from me. I couldn't stop the flash of hurt that was eager to stalk my blue eyes. He saw it, but his cold gaze only intensified. I looked away before I cried stupidly in front of him, roving back to my horse. "Don't wander too deep. The forest isn't safe," he said, heading in the direction where Alan disappeared. "Like you give a f*k about me," that was meant for my thoughts, but my lips ranted on, forcing Killian to cast an expressionless stare my way before completely vanishing out of sight. I was left there for a full minute, trying my hardest not to cry. I was about to jump on my horse when I heard sharp movements against the tree. It was the figure I had been following. A male, wearing black clothing. I followed him. I couldn't see his face, it was covered with a piece of woolen fabric. Before my eyes, he bent to pick up a bow and pulled an arrow from behind. His hands held a crossbow and an arrow that had been fixed properly for a shot. As I moved closer, he released the arrow in the bow, picking up another arrow that was on the ground. Who was he? He wasn't dressed like any of the warriors or the pack members that came hunting. Suddenly, an unknown fear kicked against my chest. Killian. Somehow I became terrified, carelessly stepping on a twig, which sent the man's gaze my way. Only his eyes were visible to me, but he seemed pissed, heading my way. I took cautious steps backward, but before I could make a run, he gripped me, dropping his arrow and bow to the ground. Instantly, I reached for the dagger in my boots, diving it into the man's stomach. He was bleeding from his body, but unfortunately, my injury to him didn't do anything to him. Instead, it made him angrier. He held me by the neck, as I held on to his clothes. It was then I saw the crescent mark on his wrist. He wasn't an intruder, he belonged to our pack. He tossed me harshly against the ground. His nails elongated as he lunged at me to kill. Suddenly, a figure jumped out from the trees before my soon-to-be killer managed to reach me, standing between my killer and myself. He had his face covered as well, but when he glanced my way, his striking deep hazel eyes met mine. I could never forget those gazes. It was the man from the Luna coronation. Kaiser Black. The one Killian seemed to hate. His eyes moved from mine to the other man, and he growled, seeming very pissed. Kaiser lunged at the other man, and the man was tossed away, bleeding from his chest, but instead of charging at Kaiser, he ran away. Kaiser turned to me, about to reach for me, but suddenly the sounds of hasty steps approaching were heard. He glanced my way, his eyes conflicted over whether to move towards me or run away. With a glance and another frustrated growl, Kaiser scurried into the forest, leaving me rooted on the ground. Soon, Killian and some of the pack's members rushed from the trees into my view. The skin on Killian's forehead trembled, confusedly, as his cold eyes glowered down at me in disbelief. In no time, the pack's warriors surrounded me. My eyes shot around confusedly. The head warrior of the pack, and Killian's best friend, Mason, ambled to me, as I forced my legs to stand. He picked up the crossbow and arrow that the other man had dropped beside me. Mason's raging eyes held mine deathly, before trailing to Killian. "It's the same. She's the one that tried to murder the Alpha and Thea." My eyes widened. I turned to find Killian's cold, undecipherable stare on me. "This is bad.